Welcome to Health System CIO's interview with Mouneer Odeh, VP and Chief Data and AI Officer with Cedars-Sinai. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Mouneer, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Anthony.
All right, great. You want to start off by telling me a little bit about your organization and your role?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the Chief Data and AI Officer here with Cedars-Sinai. Cedars-Sinai is one of the top destinations for care in the United States. We are also a really great research facility, do some amazing research, both clinical trials as well as computational biomedicine. I think one of the things that's really, really special about Cedars, in addition to the wonderful care and the culture that we have, is the progressive attitude towards technology and innovation in general.
Hmm.
And that really positions us to leverage tools like AI to do some amazing things in the future. So I'm excited about the work that we are doing and even more excited about the journey ahead.
All right, great. Let's start off. What I assume your background is data and not AI, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm interested in um, sort of the evolution of the ITC suite at health systems a little bit. I'd like to talk about that a little bit. We've seen CIOs over the past 3, 4 years um, add the title of digital to, so it's a lot of people are chief information and digital officer. Um, and I've seen a lot of pairings now of data and AI. There's probably, there's CNIOs, there's CMIOs, there's CISOs, there's CTOs. There's a lot of titles in the C-suite in IT. And I'd like your thoughts on sort of what we're seeing as far as AI being paired with data, although it does stand alone in certain places. The marriage of AI and data probably makes sense. But your thoughts on sort of any other thoughts you have on the dynamics of the C-suite in IT and what we're seeing as far as certain things, swirling around and people just trying to find out, I guess, the best recipe.
Yeah. I think it's a great question. I think it does depend a lot on the individuals, the organization. I can talk a little bit about my journey and my story. So I actually come at it from more of the economist slash data scientist. So my education background is in economics. I started my career in healthcare in the pharmaceutical life sciences space, doing analytical consulting. What we would now call data science is sort of morphed over every 5 to 7 years. The field has evolved quite a bit. So I've kind of worked from more the advanced analytics side into the data, and now coming full circle back to where AI is leading us. So the machine learning, neural networks are things that I was doing way back in grad school. Sort of took a little divergence to make sure that in healthcare we could manage the data better. But ultimately, where we are nowadays with our ability to bring together data from across a variety of different modalities, as well as the computational power and just the mathematics behind AI, we are at a really, really interesting inflection point where some amazing things are starting to happen. I do think there is a strong linkage, at least the way that I look at this in my background, between the data and AI. I sort of see it as a continuum of data-driven intelligence that's accelerating research and discovery, improving patient care, delivering better experiences to our providers and other team members, and driving operational efficiencies. And the data is the fuel that drives the AI. I think if you don't understand the quality of that and how you manage that data, you might end up realizing that AI behaves in unpredictable ways. I think sometimes the difference between AI that behaves like a really good graduate student or a fantastic assistant and AI that behaves like your drunk friend
Yeah,
is quality of the data, right?
right.
So I think I see those as being really strongly interlinked. I report into the CIO. I think with analytics in general, we tend to have like strong relationships with our customers within the organization. And so, it's important that we bridge between the operational needs and the technology enablement aspect of that. And I think that's something throughout my career I've always tried to find that sweet spot between the operations and the technology.
In your work, you said you report to the CIO. In your work, who would be the other IT C-suite executives you would have a lot of interaction with?
So my peers would be the Chief Health Informatics Officer, Dr. Sean Miller. We do have a Chief Health AI Research Officer, so Dr. Sumit Chugh. So because we have both of those worlds, I kind of am a dyad partner to each of them, one in more the clinical healthcare operations space and the other more in the research space. But of course, I have to work very closely with our application team leaders as well. So we have a VP for applications, and the infrastructure side becomes important as well. So our Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Security Officer, those are key stakeholders that increasingly AI is being delivered through applications. We have to work very closely with our application teams as well.
Yeah, tell me more about that. What you mean by that, it being delivered through applications versus what? So tell me, when it comes through applications, I think of that as coming in through like a lot of existing vendors. There's an upgrade
Yeah.
and they say, hey, in this latest upgrade, we put a whole bunch of AI in there. So now we've got AI through the vendor, through the application. But I think obviously your point is that we can do it outside of that, sort of on our own, either leveraging an existing LLM like ChatGPT, or we can build our own. But you tell me,
I
because
think that's right.
I get lost really quickly here.
Yeah, no, that's right. And the world is changing very quickly on us, Anthony. So, like, some of this is like trying to understand where we are today, and some of this is skating to where the puck is going to be. And so, um, I'll give you the example of Epic. Epic is our electronic health record system, and they have a very robust and increasingly aggressive AI strategy. You could almost say that they're reinventing themselves from a software company to an AI company. And it's because they sit on top of all that great data and because they have the integration into the workflow. So they have the eyeballs of nurses and physicians and so many other folks involved in the treatment and delivery of care. That gives them a position to be able to not only develop a lot of great tools, but to deploy them very quickly through their tools. And with agentic AI, at some level, it kind of replaces some of the needs that you had with software. So instead of clicking a mouse to do certain things, you're interacting in more natural ways with the application to command it to do certain tasks. That's increasingly where we're headed. And so, yes, we develop probably about a third of our AI tools are developed internally, and then we have to figure out how to wire that information into the workflows. A lot of times it'll go through Epic or through Microsoft Office or other delivery mechanisms. Sometimes it's a standalone application. But a third of our innovation with AI is coming from platform players like Epic or Microsoft. And then about a third of it is best in breed solutions that are out there. There's a ton of innovation, and so we're constantly looking at bringing some of that innovation to improve the care that we're able to provide.
So if I have the numbers right, it would be approximately a third Epic, a third best of breed vendors, and a third self-developed.
Yeah, that's right. And it varies a lot. It's starting to shift more and more towards, as companies like Epic are gaining speed, we see that growing more in the future. But it's often a question of like when they are mature enough and ready to build out the use cases that we would like to deploy at the scale that we're looking to do.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic of what's going on with Epic and how they continue to grow and continue to develop pieces of the workflow that had been done by third parties, and they just move into more and more spaces. So it's an interesting dynamic. I wonder if there's ever, I mean, is there ever a reason, I mean, not to go so deeply in with one vendor, even though it's tempting and it's easier and the workflows are there, but it's like the idea of putting all the eggs in one basket. Is it ever like, you know what? Let's have a few pieces outside. I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, I think there's often a struggle and a balance between complexity of having a variety of different solutions and the simplicity of kind of having a smaller set of strategic partnerships that we have. I think the challenge is you're never able to get everything done out of just one or two or even a small number of platform plays.
Hmm.
Because we do embrace innovation, that does mean like part of our strategy is to find those innovators that are out there and really bring that innovation to the care and to our team members here. So I don't think we'll ever be like all in on, just going with the platform play. In our case, we evaluate that balance as a trade-off between the complexity and simplicity and as a trade-off between innovation versus waiting for it to be available. And, there is a benefit sometimes to waiting, but if you're waiting 2 or 3 years to get to the right solution, or there's an innovator that has a particularly impressive capability, we don't necessarily want to give up on that opportunity.
Completely understand. Just talk to me a little bit about the dynamic of the workflow, of the clinician workflow, and that sort of anything that Epic comes up with is going to kind of be there, right? Because that's where they are. They're in Epic, so they almost have that advantage of it's already that's where the workflow is. And if we develop something on our own, or if we get a third party player, we may do it because it's got functionality we want that Epic doesn't have yet, and so it's we still have to get it into the workflow. So we may not be getting it into Epic technically, but it's got to feel like we did to the users. Does that make sense? Just tell me.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
that's that extra layer of work that it has to be worth it to do that.
It's a little extra work to get it integrated into Epic. Epic has made it a little bit easier over time for to work with third party or our own, solutions. So there are engineering solutions where we can connect data from models that are run outside of Epic, deliver them into Epic, and make them available to users. So they don't necessarily know that it's not coming from Epic. Or it could be a vendor has like a little tab. It'll sort of be, for that particular vendor, but it's a space that becomes available from within the Epic world. So some people might know that it's not coming directly from Epic, but for the most part, it more or less starts to feel seamless for folks. Anthony, I wish it was easier to do that, but we do put a premium, to your point, on trying to make it as natural and intuitive as possible for people to access these tools and use these tools. If you don't, then they get underutilized, and then we don't really get the impact that we're seeking.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest issues that I'm talking to people about now is use, right? I mean, we don't want to
Yeah,
just roll stuff out. We want deep and meaningful use. And that's a lot of times where the informaticists come in, led by usually the CMIO, the CNIO. Use. How do we
absolutely.
further use? So, we talk about the workflow, and you talk about we can get it in here, and we get it in here, and we want it to be. But the decision of what is good enough, that usually, you tell me if I'm wrong, that's going to come through a governance body where users are represented, and perhaps they get almost a demo of the IT folks say, "Hey, listen, this is what you wanted, or this is what you said you wanted, and here's how we were able to this one-off that you said you love, and you said we had to go outside, so we got it, and here's how we've got it in. Here's how it's in your workflow. What do you think?" Right? It's like drum roll. Then you wait and you see they go, "Oh yes, this works," or "Oh no, not even close." I mean, obviously you don't want it that dramatic. You want to know as you go, so it's not a big surprise, yes or no at the end. But somebody or somebody has to decide if it is good to go or needs work.
That's right. That's right. And that is historically has been one of the real barriers to innovation is that implementation side of that, right? Integrating into the workflow. So who sees what information? What actions do you expect them to take from it? What are their expectations, right? Do they really understand what the model is saying, right? So there is a tremendous amount of precision that you need to build into the implementation in order to, one, instill confidence that this is a solution that's actually going to make a difference, but two, to make it natural and intuitive for folks to use it. I think that's, years ago, it was super hard to just get access to the data. Then it became super hard to build these models. We're getting to the point where those technical challenges, yes, they're still there, but nowhere nearly as much as they were in the past. Our big challenge today going forward to implementing at scale is exactly that implementation side of it. That is one of the things that I think is really great about Cedars is that we bring those multidisciplinary perspectives to kind of help us understand and solve those challenges. And the informaticists are absolutely essential in that process. But a lot of times we do need to work with a pretty diverse set of teams to get to the right answer. And sometimes what we're learning and trying to get better at, Anthony, is it's not a one and done thing.
Mm.
Sometimes you kind of have to stick with that innovative process to try to continue to iterate and iterate and iterate until you finally get it the right way.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. Uh, to iterate and just keep improving. You need a lot of communication there, though,
Yes.
transparency with your users, so that you get them to give you that grace of, okay, I know you rolled this out, and I know it's not perfect, but I know it's not perfect, and you guys are going to keep working on it and talking to us. So you need that communication, right?
You need that communication. It's also like a little bit of a different mindset for IT organizations. Like, in the past, there was a lot of like, let me get this project done, do the
Right,
implementation, move on to the next one, right? And that
right.
was an appropriate mindset for the time. But now it's more like, how do we keep that sustained focus so that that conversation keeps going, right? Oh, so tell me more about how it's working. What are your pain points? And being proactive about helping to work with our customers, our internal stakeholders, to make sure that we're constantly aware of where those opportunities are for improvement and innovation.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of people use the word momentum.
Momentum.
We don't want to, and in the context of losing momentum is very dangerous, meaning we rolled it out and maybe we didn't do a great job. It didn't go very well. They weren't happy. The users weren't happy with what we rolled out for whatever reason. And if we lose momentum, that means we lose that engagement. And they say,
Yeah,
listen, I don't have time for this. Forget it. I got work to do. And the next time you come around and you want to partner with them, they say, I can't. Right.
that's
So
right. Yeah.
tell me about that dynamic of that, how important those relationships are to cherish them. And every time you have an opportunity to work with some of these folks, you better be ready and you better put your best foot forward.
Yeah, I think the customer relationship management skill set is something that organizations are putting more and more understanding and recognition that that's a gap, and it's an area that we need to address. I'd say some of it is also other disciplines. So, kind of when I talked about get this project done, move on to the next project, that's a project management discipline, and that's important foundational capability. But there's a product management mindset that is, let me stick with it and understand how people are using these tools, right? So it's not just I got it done and I moved on. It's how are people using it? What new features do they need? And that's an ongoing relationship. In fact, you're really inviting your customers to be a customer advisory group that when you talked about governance, how are they advising us in the roadmap for this product? And how are we elevating their knowledge and understanding of technology so that it's not like us as technology leaders that are driving the strategy forward, but they as operational leaders are coming, and this is becoming more and more common within healthcare, but we're kind of developing the talent on the other side of that fence who now understands technology, is going to technology conferences and coming back and saying, this is where we need to go. And I think that's a very healthy step forward. This is still in evolution. So I think we here at Cedars, like many others in the industry, are learning how to adapt to that. But it's also nice to see that our own internal customers and stakeholders are really maturing into those roles where they can be better partners as well and challenge us in the right way to get to better solutions.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You use two terms that I think have would make me treat each constituency differently. So you use when you use the word customers, to me, that's the relationship we're trying to achieve. As you know, as you, folks like yourself, IT executives in the health system, if you think of your users as customers, then you get into that product mindset as opposed to a project mindset, and you're continually working to please and wow your customers. And that seems like it'll get you towards success. If we use the term stakeholders, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it doesn't bring all those connotations of service along with it. It's stakeholders, we're all stakeholders. If they're my customers, it brings to mind a different relationship to me.
I agree with you. So I started my career more in like analytical consulting, startup organizations. So it was very much in consulting, it's very customer oriented. So I've always brought that with me throughout. What I would say is, working for large organizations, there's a little bit of a blend. Sometimes you do need to put on a different perspective, which is it's not necessarily what the customer is asking, but where's the greatest strategic impact? And I think there is a little bit of a balance there. I kind of tend to emphasize more the customer side of it because it's a way of thinking and building
Hmm.
relationships. But there is this other lens of like my job isn't to just like deliver really cool projects. My job is to elevate the strategic impact of the work that we're having and drive what I would call like transformational impact. And so that sometimes requires that we recognize that we are not just servicing and enabling, but sometimes we also have the opportunity to challenge our customers to say, well, what if we did it a little bit differently and think about the bigger picture of where we want to go, right? So instead of pursuing this piece here, we're getting diminishing returns. Let's actually invest that time on something else that's going to have bigger impact for the function or for the organization. So there's always a little bit of a it's interesting, right? In large, complex organizations, you have to wear different hats.
Hmm.
But I think it's really important to kind of usually start with that customer hat. But every now and then, you do need to take a different filter and different lens.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I've always sort of observed with the CIO role, there's a lot of supporting, but there's also got to be some leading, right? We can't
Yeah.
just we're not just order takers to help implement what's been requested. There should be some vision there, knowledge of the market, understanding of operational challenges, and then you have that deep expertise of technology, and you can proactively bring solutions that aren't being asked for that people haven't thought of. It's the whole Steve Jobs thing with the iPhone,
Hmm.
essentially giving giving people something they weren't asking for because it didn't exist. Nobody had it in their mind, and it changed the world. So, but that's Steve Jobs, and that's once in a while. In general, it's
Yeah.
a little safer to support, empower, and walk alongside. But occasionally, you can say, "Hey, what about this?" Right?
Yeah, well, I think it's like you said, that respect for expertise is important, right? So we're all coming at this problem with very different perspectives and different expertise. Clinician, physician, nurse, operational leaders, administrators, technology leaders, marketing, like there's
Yeah.
a lot of different perspectives that we do need to bring into this. I think we're getting better at trying to bring those in, like the patient experience and so many other things. But at the end of the day, Anthony, like a lot of our work is behavioral, right? It's influencing behaviors.
Hmm.
And, the psychology of marketing is actually really, really helpful. So I like to reach out to them and have conversations with them because they think they help me to think better about um, how we put ourselves in the mindset of the folks who are going to be using these tools and try to make it as natural for them as possible.
Well, that's really interesting. That's sort of next level thinking, executive thinking is, and I've heard other folks say a huge percentage of their job is selling, right? Selling a vision, selling an idea, especially when you're really leading the
Yeah.
organization in a direction. Then you have to sell it, and that's when you can go to marketing or whoever is supposed to have expertise on communicating a vision. So that's what you're doing. Yeah, that's next level stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's exciting stuff, Anthony. It's a really cool world that we're living in, and I'm excited to see where we're headed and what we'll do in the next 5 years and 10 years.
Yeah, when you talk about the environment, I mean, I think of just the immense complexity that health systems have in a place like yours, and the number of the org charts and the dotted lines and the regular lines. I mean, it's probably looks like Stephen Hawking and his chalkboard. So it's interesting for someone like yourself to look at that and understand how do I have impact? You know, where on this massive thing do I have the most impact, and how do I do that? It's just, I guess, because I know sometimes there can be frustration in organizations like that where it can be difficult to move things forward.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on any advice you have on how you found to deal with that complexity?
it's a really good question. I think um, our mission here is to drive impact at scale, right? And complexity can make that hard to do things at big scale and to do things with the right momentum. Um, I feel like some of this is systems thinking, some of this is clarity on defining what success means. A big part of this is culture. And both data and AI, slightly different flavors of this, democratizing access to data, democratizing access to AI and innovation are key enablers of how we solve complexity. If I empower people to think differently about how they're making decisions, to think differently about how they're automating tasks and projects and decision making, um, and I do that at scale, I have transformational impact. The key for me is to do that in responsible ways. And that means we need to encourage people to take on these tools and capabilities, but still create a governance layer that makes sure that we have confidence that people are interpreting things in the right way, people are deploying AI in appropriate ways. And so that quality assurance around that is where I'm putting a lot of focus, is like how to democratize access to these tools and build a layer of governance around that that allows them to solve their own problems, but do it in a way where I can put quality assurance guardrails to make sure that it's working as they intended. Because they know how to solve their problems. They don't necessarily know how to prevent bad things from happening. And that's where we try to make sure that we are providing the right guardrails and control mechanisms in place.
That's a great answer. So it's an obviously you've got the deep understanding of the tools and the potential they have, and you say, okay, I think I know, I certainly know these things can have transformational effect. I want to educate my user base. I want to roll out these tools in a safe way. So I got to roll them out in a safe way. And there's lots of pitfalls. There are lots of things you got to watch out for, right? That's what everyone's talking about. How do I do this safely? So we want to put tools in their hands that can have transformational change in a safe way. And then we want to educate them on how to use them and say, hey, I don't know exactly what you do, every little nook and cranny what you do, but I know these tools are pretty amazing and they can do some pretty special things. Let me show you what some of these cool
Yeah.
things these tools can do. And now that I've given you these cool tools in a safe way, I can let you go play and have fun and see if you can be more efficient and have fun and go
That's
at
right.
it, right? Because so tell me about that. That's really what we're doing here.
Well, I'll give you an example. We had a promptathon. The prompt. So if I
I
have,
love
if,
it. I love
yeah,
it.
if people are coming to my team to try to like get all their problems solved, we'll be here for a long time. So we said, well, let's build a promptathon. We trained people. So these are non-IT folks. So HR, supply chain, performance improvement, patient experience, right? We got like 10 or 11 teams. I forget how many. We trained them on prompt engineering skill sets. We built a RAG architecture, basically retrieval augmented generative AI capabilities, right? So we can load in our policies, our playbooks, whatever, documents that they need, and they'll build an agent that takes general like chat GPT like competency, but trains it on our own documentation and policies and procedures. And they solve their own problems because they understand them. And we had a promptathon, we judged them. Like any type of innovation, there were a few that kind of floundered because it was difficult and it's innovation and it doesn't always work out the way you want. We had a lot of them that were really, really good quality, and we committed to publishing three of those. So how do we get to the publish stage though, right? It's one thing to prototype something in a promptathon. It's another thing to go through the quality assurance to say, like, I got to pressure test this and check to see if it's really working consistently the way I expect it to do before I publish that and put it out there to the rest of our team members to be able to use that, right? And so that's how we're working with our teams, where we're helping people to acquire these skills so that they can now solve their own problems, and then work with my team to make sure that we build that governance around it so that when we deploy those solutions, we have confidence that they're doing the right thing. So that's an example of how we're taking that approach. And our hope is like a snowball, right? In the beginning, you got a few use cases, but over time, you've empowered hundreds and then thousands of people to begin solving their own problems. And the cumulative impact of that over time, I believe, will be absolutely transformational. And so, we're placing that bet on our people, and we are building the mechanisms to try to, make sure that that bet is well placed.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think that's absolutely right on. So you got this promptathon, and you are publishing some of the winners, so to speak. And when we say publishing, that means generally available in some sort of
Yes,
prompt library
that's
for
right.
employees.
That's
So
right.
there's a place where you can go, and there's a prompt library for certain workflows or jobs by task, meaning if this is your job, here's your prompt library that may help you do your work. So what would be an ongoing way, because I guess you're not going to have a promptathon all the time. As a general course of business, we would want people who've developed cool prompts that they think are helping their workflow. We would want them to share those, right?
Yes.
To share the prompts. So we want to capture the learnings. We want to capture these excellent little flowers that are sprouting in the organization and then publish them. How do we do that on an ongoing basis?
I think we're trying to solve that. I can't tell you that I've got all the answers, but I'll tell you one of the ways we do it is celebrate the successes so that there's
Hmm.
visibility into those winners, right? So we worked with communications to tell the story of the winners and the promptathon. And success breeds success, right? Other people raise their hand and say, "Hey, I got an idea. Can we work with you as well?" Now we're also taking that idea, the promptathon, and saying, "Okay, our next promptathon will be within our information technology department." There's a huge opportunity to
Mm.
upskill that group and to
Hmm.
start to think about automating certain tasks. And so we're going to build out that capability within that group. So essentially what we're doing, Anthony, is kind of building like learning communities and figuring out a diffusion model for how we spread these skill sets throughout the organization. We haven't finalized our roadmap, but the third promptathon might be with RevCycle, right? We're already building a roadmap, strategic transformation roadmap with RevCycle. Part of that roadmap will probably be a promptathon within that community. And then as we start to see these different areas, it's kind of like, planting, an orchard or so. And over time, the fruits of that will start to bear dividends, right? We'll start to see that. And so that's our strategy. Now we're trying to be thoughtful about how we pace ourselves. Like it's easy to sort of like throw some seeds and then you don't water it and you don't
Mm.
fertilize it, right? And
Hmm.
so it can be wasted effort. So we do need to think about making sure that we're pacing ourselves so that we're allowing things to take root and grow. And we're trying to think about the right ways to build those learning communities that have like at some level we train and we work with folks, but eventually we want to identify those champions within those communities
Mm,
to start to disseminate the knowledge from there on. Otherwise, we'll again be a bottleneck in that process. So those are some of the ways
mm,
that we're thinking about. This is where we think about the culture side of it. It's really a
mhm.
people side of what we're trying to do. We have other, like, we have to think harder about this. We haven't solved it all just yet. And I don't think all of our problems will be solved through like prompt engineering. But the more we organize ourselves around what are the persistent problems that we're trying to solve, and how do we bring those multidisciplinary teams and elevate the skill sets and thinking of those teams, I think the more focus we create around these problems, the more we're able to innovate as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, you think through the different components of this, um, right? So, the tools, rolling out the tools, educating the workforce, and then building I don't know the proper term, if it's the LLMs or, when you mentioned we're putting all our policies in here, it's all our stuff that people are going to
Yeah.
query with their prompts. So is that an LLM, or what do we call that thing, that body
Well,
of data?
I'll call it an agent. So we use the
Agent.
LLM, which is like the foundation model,
Yeah.
but then we train it on our documents to create a special purpose
Uh-huh.
agent that solves a particular task.
Okay. Okay, so we want to keep getting better at that. We want to
Yeah,
keep getting better with our workforce. We want to have them develop prompts. We want to make sure this doesn't get too messy. We want to have a highly curated prompt library that's clean and up to date, and everything changes. So yeah, it's a lot, but you could start to see at a very high level sort of how to structure things that'll move you in the right direction. That's where you are, right? You're starting to put the
right.
shape around. I mean, it's amazing to think, 20 years from now, we're going to think that this was the beginning, right? I mean, you think
Yeah.
about when ChatGPT, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when it launched, which I didn't even pay attention to it until maybe a year ago. But now I use it every day. I rarely use Google. I don't Google anything
Yeah,
anymore.
I know. It's better than
Chat
Google. I agree.
I live in ChatGPT. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know how to function without it, and that's amazing how fast that happened
Yes.
because it works. It simply works. You ask something. I was I was saying the other day, I'm like, and I know Apple, I believe, is in talks to have Siri powered by ChatGPT because uh, ChatGPT compared to Siri, it's night and day. I mean,
Yeah.
ChatGPT, you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. Siri says, "I don't understand what you mean." It's they're
Yeah.
really playing catch up over there at Apple.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think one of the things is how intuitive the AI technologies are,
Uh-huh.
right? They really are transforming the relationship that we have with technology. And this is sort of what I was getting at earlier about like the software is kind of being superseded by the intuitiveness of the AI, which can do those tasks without people clicking at it. In my world, like the dashboard, there'll always be a need for a dashboard. But if you think about communications, it was newspapers and then radios and then black and white TV and movies was sort of along the way. And then you have color TV and then you have cable TV and then you have internet, right? We still have the radio, right? But its share of mind, what its special purpose is, it has become a very specific tool in very particular circumstances.
Uh-huh.
I think the dashboard is sort of like that too, right? It'll still be valuable as a way of a curated way of telling a story. But people are going to start to interact with the data by just asking those questions. Just like you no
Right.
longer go to Google, they're not no longer going to go to Tableau. And sometimes there's always a need to do that, but for the most part, people are going to ask the question conversationally or even verbally of the data. And so that's how like we have to evolve our world and deliver those better experiences, more natural experiences. I think one of the problems that people have with technology is it's just not intuitive. With an electronic
Yeah.
health record system, the way that doctors and nurses think about capturing information, whereas the software says, I need discrete data elements, so, they force you through all these different things. That's not how most people think. Some people are very, inclined towards that, but most people find that hard, and it makes technology um, a challenging experience.
Right.
One of the things that contributes towards physicians, nurses, and doctors feeling very what's the word, fatigued or
Yeah, burned out.
burned out. Thank you. They're feeling burnt out. Technology's been part of that. It's not the only reason by far, but it's a part of it. Well, I think with AI, what we're starting to see is that our physicians, our nurses are starting to like find the joy in some of those tasks again. And because they're finding that joy, they're spending time with their patients, and we're seeing that the patient satisfaction scores are also getting better, right? So we're piloting these automation tools for nurses and for doctors, and on those units, what we're seeing is their patient experience scores are also getting a lot better, and that's because the nurses and doctors aren't so much like looking at a screen; they're now interacting more, and I think that that's just at the very beginning of that transformative experience that we have with technology, but in healthcare in particular, that's going to be a game changer for us.
Absolutely, amazing. I think I've kept you on way longer than I promised, Munir. That was,
Yeah.
I mean, so much there. We could go for another hour, but we've covered a tremendous amount of great stuff. I'll just ask you a final question. Um, just someone in your position. This is how I usually structure this. Best piece of advice to someone in your position at a comparably sized health system, so to kind of use somewhere else who has got a few less years of experience. What's your advice?
I think, this is a marathon, so don't sprint your way through it. Think about building the foundational capabilities. Think big, start small, and
Mm,
scale fast. Um, Scaling is, I think, where a lot of folks struggle, right? Because if you don't think about the broader scaling strategy, you can get caught up in point solutions all the time. So
uh-huh.
we do need to sort of think about where we want to be, and use our early wins as building blocks to get us to where we need to be, and not as distractions or diversions, right? They shouldn't be dead ends that don't sort of contribute to the big picture. So I think it's a little difficult with AI because it is so hyped, right? The pressure is so strong to deliver, but we've got to figure out what those early wins are, but build towards an amazing program that we're going to build over time. And I think just having the big picture, keep your eyes on the prize, and make sure that you pace yourself and your teams to be able to deliver that, and then manage expectations to be a part of that, right? And the other thing I'd say, Anthony, is like you don't have to have the solution, the answers, right? You got a lot of smart people across the organization. Is how do you build those relationships with folks and channel their energies and their passions and their expertise towards the solution? So in many ways, it's really about orchestrating. You don't have to be the hero that sort of figures it all out. You just really need to orchestrate and channel all of those great talents towards where we want to go.
That's wonderful, Munir. Fantastic conversation today. Brilliant. Sounds like you're doing tremendous things over there, and I hope we can catch up with you again down the road. So thank you so much for your time today.
Awesome. It was great meeting you, Anthony.
Have a great day.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.